Hello people, Linker here, and I saw how many of you liked the auto debate that did cover a lot of the basics about Stargazing versus 4th faction, but there's a lot more to talk about, so today you're in for a treat. I brought the inventor of 4th faction, who's more qualified than that Aimb to have a talk. Our talk is probably the most in-depth resource available about this in the game. Aimb, a guide mater and an awesome friend of mine, has a perspective worth listening to, even if he's wrong on some things, but I digress. Great fun. Definitely check out the link to his original 4th faction Reddit post below. We talked about many things, so let me know if you'd like more. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it.
Okay.
Alright, so we do agree that levels are generally more optimal once you get to a certain point. Levels, and specifically Dust, which is the most sought after resource in the pursuit of levels, is the first thing that you should get every time that you do have the resource to get it. So assume I just start my dailies, and the first thing I should do is I should go to the Lilith store. I should buy every dust that I have available for a remotely decent price. This means fast rewards up to like 300, something like that, refreshing the store, buying the dust chest until a very certain point, and then I'll have a certain roster of heroes. I'll have to the extent of like 20, 25 heroes that I keep using, depends on the point I am in the endgame. And the question is whether it is more valuable for me to replace a hero from my current sets, or whether it is more valuable for me to invest more in leveling. And that will be the source where I make my decisions. Obviously, because the vast majority of my diamonds will go towards acquiring dust in those levels, so if I play 100% optimally the vast majority of the time, the question becomes, all right, with what I have left, what is better, 4th faction or Stargazing? So I have here the original post of that Aimb made talking about 4th faction. And as you can see over here, it says, currently unanswered question. We're talking about the inflection point for switching for Pokemons to hero XP, handling dust walls, etc. So we're both in agreement, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, that at some point, if not at some point, you should from the start focus on dust, and you should consider the inflection point for when is it that you want to zero down on dust, or what other resources you want to make. We're kind of, during this heated debate, trying to understand, to get to the bottom of what you should do with your diamonds, how many levels you should do, and what is 4th faction about, and whether is it better or not than Stargazing. You should go ahead and correct me on everything that I just said if you feel like is wrong.
Okay, so the 4th faction, I guess what people maybe have misunderstood about 4th faction is that it's a comparison of the heroes that you get, because for the vast majority of the beginning of the game, you go for the heroes. The question is, it used to be that you would want to, as soon as you started, you may want to start working on your Talene, right? Because she might actually fit in the very first team that you make. Now that's just not true. There's 4th faction heroes got good enough that you have hyper carries and supports that can be made sooner and actually more effective, and not spend tons of diamonds that always come at the opportunity cost of possibly leveling the heroes that you're building. As you go through the beginning of the game, it pretty much remains true that as you get select summons, which in order to get to select summons, you have to have the ascended heroes to get to them. As those accumulate, you have a certain amount of diamonds to spend, and you will always spend on those select summons because you're still trying to build specific functional teams. That's kind of true no matter what, right? And if you want to stargaze with diamonds specifically, then that's kind of the case you have to make, is that those diamonds aren't so costly to turning diamonds into dust into levels, or just continuing to summon to the point where you have fully functional strong teams to then be leveled, and the stats are a multiplier against hero effects, furniture effects, etc. So it's a really hard case to make that the diamonds should be spent on stargazing, given how many diamonds it takes to stargaze. Because you could, if you turn it into levels, and of course it depends on what level you are. I can't just say 10 levels, but I'm guessing somewhere in the, I probably should have done the math, but let's just call it 20 levels that you could have gained. The stats on those heroes, the 4 faction heroes, that's 25 heroes that went up by 10 levels. And if you had, let's say, Talene, she's only able to boost a single team. You need 5 fully functional teams, and it's pretty easy with how good 4 faction heroes are to say that they're just simply better a 4 faction hero that is 10 levels above Talene probably is comparable to Talene, and that's just one of them. Compare that to 25 of them, and it's pretty tilted. So if we kind of agree that what's valuable is to push as far in campaign as possible, I mean reasonably possible, not just pure min maxing, then it becomes a really hard sell to say that stargazing is worth the diamonds, because you can still work on it with the cards. You get the cards faster through faction towers by going 4F. And for all 4F, what 4 faction means is you're focusing the development on them instead of planning on using diamonds for stargazing for the foreseeable future. It will become an interesting question of when to swap, but it probably won't happen until you're almost done with your 4 faction teams, and you're going to swap Celopogians in to already functional teams to improve them. And Lucretia is about the only one that defines her entire team. No one will probably build God Comp ever again unless they are paying for the diamonds to turn it into God Comp.
Okay, so let me just unpack all that. So you're saying, first, any time that anyone is starting to stargaze a hero, they have to understand that they're using all the diamonds that they would otherwise be using to get dust on that hero, and the level that you can get for all your heroes across all your comp by investing those said diamonds on dust instead of, like, say, a Talene or stargazing anything, is just so incredibly high that it's hard to justify any kind of stargazing at all. And this is partially because those stargazed heroes hardly ever define their own sets. You have Lucretia who does that, but I'll Strongarm your argument. You do get the stargazing tickets from those towers. You could possibly get Lucretia on her own without that much stargazing at all. So what you're saying is, all right, so I have the leftover diamonds, the few leftover diamonds that I do have. Why would I ever want to go into that sad pit hole that is throwing all the diamonds away and getting back one Celopogian that I would otherwise stargaze? Do you feel like that's fair?
Correct. Yeah. And, yeah. Versus increasing the level of all the heroes, which then makes all 5 teams more effective at the content you're on.
All right. I would answer to that first. Yeah, I agree. I think if you're talking about completely optimal comps, as we did discuss a little bit earlier, you're talking about mostly like min-maxed variants of, say, like 1 Thorn and like 5 Elite Plus heroes that kind of pull towards Thorn, like a Nara or something. You're talking about your Elite Brutuses everywhere. Why do I feel like stargazing is still worth it in that environment? I think if you're playing like decently not min-max, if you're not completely trying to min-max to the point where you have only 5 heroes, which first of all is, I don't think that's the way, like, I don't think anybody really plays like that, and second, it's incredibly unfun, and third, I don't think the game is as big as some people do think it is. Fodder becomes much less relevant when you're talking about ascending very specific heroes. I think there's still some other Stargaze heroes that you will want to get. I think, for example, and I'll make that one claim, and I'll make it pretty short, I think Alna is one hero that can justify herself on such settings. I think Alna Isolde, for example, can make a 5th set that would push further than 15 levels higher Isolde on his own. And I'd love to hear, as an Isolde aficionado, what's your opinion on that?
Okay, so if you were to take the team that I have, it already pushes minimum power without Alna. Alna is only good at improving the team that she's on, unlike Lucretia, who becomes the team. Like, everything revolves around Lucretia. Alna is one of the best heroes in the game, by far, if not the best hero. But that doesn't mean that she's worth the amount of diamonds from stargazing, because she only improves whatever's there. So she's almost the perfect example of a hero that is definitely worth building with Stargazer cards, especially after Lucretia. And then maybe, if you're a couple copies away, speeding it up with some diamonds. And of course, it depends on if you're, free to play and all that. This isn't even in consideration for a long time. But in the end, you're going to end up in a situation where, because remember, you're still talking about just the Isolde team. Even if you can make the case that Alna plus the Isold comp, is better than that whole comp 15 levels higher. There's 4 other teams that are 15 levels higher. So Alna can only ever be that kind of hero where which of my 5 teams is struggling, I'm going to send Alna there to help. And she's perfect for that. She's kind of like the new Talene for that. But in the end, she's never going to be able to do that for 5 teams. Whereas leveling just advances you further. It gets your stats closer to the enemy that you're fighting. And that's more helpful than someone that makes everything immune.
All right.
You can tank it with more stats.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the base premise where you're saying, look, all right, you're getting you're getting an Alna, so that might be worth it. 15 levels on Isold, maybe not. Granted, the 15 levels on other teams are going to be so significant that there's nothing to consider here. And what I'd ask you back is, what exactly are you comparing this to? Do you think there's a factional, once you get the core like 4 to 5 carries that you do, and we can actually go into which carries these are if you'd like. Do you think there's any factional hero that beats that? And do you think there's any hero at all in the game? Or should you just blindly like get those 5 heroes and spell all your resources into leveling to eternity?
So for the most part, that's why I made the core the core of heroes is different than just getting the heroes. In other words, you make something functional, not just make the best heroes. Because what supports how you're going to flex heroes around when it's not working, because teams change. You need different combinations to beat the content. Everything kind of fits within that context. So when it comes to, are there any required heroes? There is not a single required hero in this game. Like, you can be without Thor, and you can be without Isold, without Lucretia. You can make it work. And in fact, one of the ways to make it work is even to build what you want and then level. And it's boring to level, right? But in the end, this game is about fun first, and then most of us want to do it well. So what I think what it's going to end up coming out to, so the AFK Analytica group is the one that's kind of working on the specific numbers of this, right? So when it is that you'll be, how good is dust, how good is leveling, all that conversion, that's going to be where you get your min max of thumb and all that.
Well, I have
But
been
when
a
you're
part of the people that does
okay,
the data mining there. I do.
sure,
I am
sure.
somewhat acquainted with it, but I do want to return back. So you did say, all right. So I'm not.
Yeah. So I want to kind of roll that back. So here's what I was going to say about that. Even if so, let's just say that leveling, a player decides that leveling is less fun than, they don't want to min max, they want to build heroes. Stargazing still comes up against the alternative of spending diamonds, which is developing furniture. And even that tends to be better than building the Celepogens, right? Because you're still improving your team. It's not about the stats usually, it's usually about the effects. And for the majority of the game, you will have heroes to build furniture on. Every time you replace an old hero with a hero that fits better, even for faction, using select summons. I mean, select summons is basically like a hero a month, right? So that's furniture that needs to be built. So you will always have the alternative to Stargazing to do something else. So if leveling is kind of unfun, even furniture all by itself is in contest with, and it's not as good as leveling, but it's certainly, it might be more fun. But Stargazing really is like a diamond sink. It is a whale only feature, unless that is, if someone thinks it is fun to do that and I want to do it, then they can. But they will not progress as quickly as someone who builds 4F heroes, and you can go in a pretty simple path. It's not min maxing in some complicated form. It's you go for the carries, you build the carries, you build their SI and furniture, you rush the heck out of the carries furniture. As you need more teams, you plan for them, you get the carries, you get the supports. And then the best thing to do by far is to level. Going to be pretty soon after you get all your legendary furniture and get a few of the 3 of 3s pretty quickly. It's going to be, leveling's the best
All
thing.
right. So I think leveling is going to be the best thing, but I think I'm going to hold you to the same standard. You're saying, all right, at some point you are going to get the core supports because they are fun. I'm saying, or at both cases, you're saying, all right, I'm doing something that's suboptimal. I'm wishing and I'm choosing, while knowing what I choose, to not boost like Daemon to Eternity and Thorin to Eternity, and I am gonna get their supports. Why are you doing that? Not because it's optimal, but because it's fun. So you're entering a different kind of realm. We're not talking about min-maxing campaign, which is not for faction or gazing oriented, in my opinion. It's some sort of leveling oriented almost entirely. Like if you look at what min-maxing campaign it looks like, I think you will see that almost all resources will go almost completely and inevitably into levels. So if you're talking about where you want to spend outside of levels, fun does come into it. So you want to see, all right, what kind of cores work?
Sure.
What kind of heroes work at the same level when you do adjust for that diamond investment? So taking levels completely out of the equation and looking at hero worth per diamonds, and that's, I think, not in favor of Stargazing, which has many more rewards, which over time do get much more valuable than fourth faction does, like fourth faction and fodder and all of that. I think a lot of those Stargaze heroes will have, first of all, many carry sets that are more consistent. Second, they'll be able to justify themselves on the same level basis much more than their alternatives. If you look at Alna, just getting Alna or getting most any 3 4 faction heroes ascended, or even 4, even if you nullify all the other rewards that you get that are much more valuable than the fodder you'll end up getting, I think you could make the case that yes, you could actually be more efficient that way, have more fun that way, and get access to those stronger heroes.
Okay, so let me at least say that I think people misunderstand what I meant by four faction. I mean, and in the post, it goes through exactly what it is. It's the heroes and spending diamonds to build the heroes and never stopping. It's never been about that. It's been about switching the focus from that players should stargaze, because that has been the meta, right? Wouldn't you agree that even free to play were advised to stargaze?
I'd even
So
say that
when I
I
made that
right
post,
now
mhm,
advise free-to-play players to Stargaze just to make things
okay,
easier.
sure, okay, and that's fine. But I kind of want to take the phrase for a faction meta back from the idea that it's about doing nothing but making the heroes. That's not what it's about. It's about shifting the gaze away from the gaze away from stargazing to spending those same diamonds instead on things like furniture, usually right when you're able to attain it, and then leveling those heroes once you have the functional sets available. That's why, again, because that's how you think about how functional is this team, and once you have the functional team, then you pretty much have the most to gain by leveling that team. It scales. So when you're talking about stargazing, that's all four faction meta is a change in the focus away. It's not this full prescription of ignore Celepogians completely. Eventually, you will be at. It would be absolutely foolish if in 3 years you're still working only on four faction heroes and you have an entire inn full of every hero and they all have furniture and all you're doing is sitting around now gazing.
All right, so I think this is a good
It's
to make
okay.
sure this is like all the way across. Before faction, you're not talking about only blindly summoning heroes, and this is important. This is all already here in the original post. Aimb is perfectly the most qualified person to ever talk about this. He is the person who made the original post advocating for faction. This was 4 months back, and it still holds strong to this day. Many players support this approach. What you're saying is it's not about blindly summoning all heroes in the tavern and like speed running through your wish list, but rather it's about using like getting the most value out of what you do for your summons. It's about the fact that stargazing is so incredibly expensive. What you said in the start, that using diamonds into that is pretty much a complete sink where you're not going to get as much out of it. And instead, you're saying, I'll get the bare minimum I get at 4 faction, the bare minimum I need or that I'd like to do, adjusting for how much fun I want to have playing the game. And I'll use the rest to kind
Right.
of spiral through resources to level that through and deliver on getting the same power level. Do you think that's right?
Right. It's about recognizing the cost of getting that one really good hero. it is literally at the expense of 5 teams, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. At least understanding your
I do
alternatives.
want to deliver back that. I do want to answer that because I think now that I get that, I think I have a better picture of this. I did understand this before, but this is something I want to address. You're saying on the one end, the Stargaze hero is on the expense of those 5 separate teams. You're getting that? You're not getting 15 levels. How can you possibly get something like, I don't know, Talene, where you're taking 15 levels away from your Isold, your Daemon, your Aaron, your Thorin, all of that, and it sounds perfect, I think. But on the other end, and I'd love to hear you, like, how would you address that? I think after you get those 5 factional heroes, once you get the key heroes that you really need to those certain levels, some of them need their furniture, some of them need the signature item, getting factional heroes as well is going to also cost you a similar amount across the whole team. That's because obviously Stargazing rewards is going to be pretty well. That's because you're going to be completing fewer copies of those Stargaze meta. And I think the result that I end on here, and this is what I'd like you to respond to, is like, I feel like you'll end in a situation where you have those same 4 faction heroes, you spend however much you do for leveling, and then you spend the rest on the on gazing, which essentially ends in my original advice, which is you get 8 viable usable heroes, which I think is around the bare minimum that you end up when leveling that you need. Maybe not all ascended, maybe some mythic, maybe some not, but I made it like kind of near player friendly. And then with the rest of the diamonds, what you need to do is kind of make it the most efficient. So you need to either Stargaze for heroes or choice some of them. And I do not see evidence why getting 3 factional heroes at that point is more effective than Alna. And I can say that same thing at any amount of diamonds you want to invest on dust. So I think it doesn't even matter how much dust you want to get, even if you want to min-max things and get all the dust, or you're just playing casually and you get part of the dust. I think at any point, Stargaze heroes, Celapogents are going to give solid enough competitions to 4 faction heroes to be worth it if you do deviate from that complete min-max approach, which is like 4 or 5 or 6 ascended heroes total and nothing past that.
Okay, so yeah, if you would like to, one thing I will give you is that if you're talking about replacing every single hero with 4 faction, especially, then there will be you probably should not be spending diamonds ad nauseum on that. However, the pacing of the game releases new 4 faction heroes. It is in all likelihood, if you are getting extra diamonds, because we're already assuming that you're doing select summons, and that means you're saving diamonds for it, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So then the question becomes, at what point did those diamonds start to switch? Because we can go ahead and just say, let's just assume that we already have our leveling strategy and those diamonds are set aside too. Let's just say, and let's just say we have diamonds in excess of that, and mostly diamonds above noble rewards and monthly rewards. So that this is pretty significant spending. So if we do have diamonds in excess of those, and what to do with those, then gazing is an alternative, and so is spending more for more dust. And that's where it's going to be. You need the people that are crunching the numbers, and I'm not one of the people crunching the numbers. So in the end, if we're still going to have more information about when to do what, but I think what is worth recognizing is that the pace of the release of new heroes means that you will need more SIs, which you can spend diamonds on red emblems. But one thing that you can say is that select summons get you emblems first of all. Then diamonds above are probably always going to be optimally put into levels, which isn't more fun. But you can still gaze with diamonds, and it's just about recognizing the severe cost of that because of what you could do for your entire team by leveling or by focusing on keeping up with the furniture for the newly released heroes. But eventually, you only have 5 teams to make, right? There's some hazy territory in here where we need more input from people that are crunching numbers.
All right. I will need to go in about 10 to 20 minutes. So I want to kind of wrap it up, and I want you to respond to it last. I do want to consider a few things that I feel like are correct, because I have been on the numbers. I want to first address the fact that the amount of stargazing materials, like when you're talking about the amount of levels that you get from the stargazing materials, they are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Like if you're talking about leveling versus stargazing first, I mean, you said it indirectly, but like, yeah, stargazing is very inefficient in leveling in and on its own. Second, I think like while I did say, for example, that Alna might be worth more than any given 2 or something heroes, I feel like there is going to be a range at the very least, and I'll concede that part. And maybe you disagree with me in the first, but I will concede that about 5 to 10 to 15 heroes is about a range where 4 faction is actually superior. And this is the reason that you do see people around chapter 33, 34 spiral significantly faster, 32 especially, I think, spiral significantly faster than players who do gazing. I do feel like in the very end of it, from the numbers I've seen, from the replays that we see currently, and from the meta that we have right now, as of the time that we're saying this, I do think in the very, if you take things to the logical extent and you're not completely min-maxing everything towards levels, at some point, gazing becomes very, very efficient because those heroes are overall stronger. And with that, I'm not going to say anymore because I want to really hear what you have to say about that. And I'm really enjoying just talking to you. And thank you so much for coming. And I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure thing. So I'll just end it by saying one of the, I guess, projects that I'm working on is to divide diamond income for that specific reason, because everyone has a different level of diamond income. They're going to spend it slightly differently. Someone that has, and so I start at the point of noble, rewards, and monthly. When you say diamonds in excess of select summons and dust, you were talking about someone that is spending more than those. And that's why it requires the number crunching. Because I agree with you that in excess of those, stargazing starts to become a question, like stargazing for diamonds. I'm not saying that it's the right answer, but it is the question that someone should be asking at that point. And it helps to divide diamond income for that reason, because free to play players, it's just like, anything. You pay rent and then you have extra. You end up informing players wrongly if you never look to see how much they're spending in the game. A free to play player should not buy the same things. So, stargazing for them is far more expensive to what they can do in the game. And I'm not saying, okay, I think I can say don't do it. Even if you may want to recommend it, but that seems pretty safe. Like that's super expensive for free to play. Anyway, we can have that debate later. But in the end, that's all I want to say is that 4F is about changing focus. It's not about ignoring.
All right. Sounds awesome. Obviously, I agree with some part, disagree with others, but overall, I think this is a very in-depth talk we had, and we should definitely have another one of those. Thank you so much for coming. People, let me know what you think, whether you're convinced or one side or another, and I'll see you soon. Okay.
Little bit.
Okay. Yo, we did a debate. Yo. Fun times. Fun times. So as you heard, that was just the first part of our talk. Like and subscribe. Let me know if you'd like more of our talk below. Thank you so much to Aimb for coming along, and I've been Linger. Peace.